Guyana's general and regional elections held on March 2, 2020, a day that can never be wiped away from our history. On that day, when Guyanese headed to the polls to decide on the future they wanted, there was a natural expectation that the results would be within 48 to 72 hours. That wasn't to be, for it took 5 months, during which everyone saw bold and numerous attempts by the APNU+AFC coalition to subvert the will of the Guyanese people and to deny the People's Progressive Party civic victory. Clearly, much was at stake, and despite the uncertainty and turmoil our people and country were forced to endure, in the end, democracy, though assaulted, prevailed. We tell you the story of the assault on democracy.
But March 2nd was a relatively good day. It was a calm day. I worked at a polling station in Sophia. There were 0 incidents, no trouble at all. We worked late into the night. The GCOM staff were very professional. The counting of the ballots at the end of the day was professionally done.
It mostly started with a day of hope and joy. I think all of us were happy we got to that stage. As new political parties, we got to the point where we were able to contest. We had our name on that ballot, and we had months, years of hard work prior to that. So I think it was a day that a lot of us had a lot of hope in our hearts.
We Guyanese, the electorate, had reckoned that there was going to be a change. Because I believe persons came out to the polls on that particular day with intentions to change the government, who in our minds, as a political party, were not functioning effectively in relations to fulfilling their mandate. So optimism was high.
You'll recall that on the 21st of December 2018, no confidence motion was passed in the National Assembly, which mandated that elections be held within 90 days or 3 months therefrom. 15 months later, and a slew of litigation all the way to the pinnacle court, the Caribbean Court of Justice. It is only after that and the conclusion of that. And the shenanigans at the Guyana Elections Commission had already started in delay, etc., for us to actually have an election date set for March 2nd.
So this March 2nd election, I think, was significant in the sense it was part of our constitutional requirement, but it brought us together as a people. We had one common objective, which is to ensure that the rule of law, transparency, democracy, fair and free elections was respected and complied with.
It's what went before the motion of no confidence that was passed and what went after.
The real impending disaster was March the 3rd and March the 4th. So we have to zero in on those days.
What happened after March 2nd was something that went beyond the pale of partisan politics. It was an attack on the fundamental structures of a country. If a country's electoral systems, by which you determine not only who governs as the executive, but within the republic, who represents the people directly in the National Assembly, then the entire concept of the country is meaningless. The laws in themselves in general are meaningless. If it is that somebody could, or any group of people, could fundamentally deconstruct, and within the glare of the international community, within the glare of the people themselves.
Well, it all went wrong because there was a determination on the part of the Granger government to deny the results of the election. It began, of course, within GCOM. What happened, as we all know, is that GCOM was infiltrated by the Granger government. Employees of GCOM were politicized, and they set out to rig the results and the returns of Region 4 when they realized, that is the government of the day at the time, fundamentally the PNC, when they realized by the conclusion of the elections that they had lost it. How did they know? The statements of poll.
I had it on fairly credible grounds that the PPP were ahead, and APNU was running a second to them. And so my thoughts were, there's something afoot and they're trying to steal this election. And my thoughts were, here we go again. This is taking us back to the dark days of the 70s and the 80s. And this was my biggest fear, that somehow the whole process would be manipulated and, citizens like myself would not be able to do anything about it.
I was informed that Mr. Mingo suddenly reported that he was not feeling well, and he abruptly ended the exercise, and that it will resume the next morning. I was alarmed, but we didn't think so deeply into it. The next morning, we turned up at the scheduled time. Mingo could not have been found. Then after a long wait, we were told that he fell ill and that he has to be taken to the hospital. And we were told first he was not in the building. Then he was in the building. And then this ambulance appeared in front of a Ashbin building. And Mingo appeared coming down the step in a wheelchair with some medical instruments plugged into him, including a breathing apparatus over his mouth. And he was whisked away to the hospital. Then there was a protracted delay, and then two other persons began the tabulation exercise. And they started to use not the statements of poll, but some other documents. And then the problem began. And then Mingo came back and resumed, and he started to use the same document. And we couldn't stop him. Claudette Singh locked herself up in a room. She was not coming out. I saw the attention of Myers. She came down. She said she can't interfere. Lowenfield could not have been found. And this thing going at an alarming speed. And then I left. And I went home. And I believe that this is the most defining moment. It was the game changer. I went home, and I wrote out in my handwriting an application. I didn't have a typist. Me and my driver alone, Riaz Holadar. I didn't have a typist or anything. Wrote with my handwriting. Call a judge and ask him if he would hear an urgent application on my behalf orally. The judge was reluctant. I persuaded him, point out the law to him, all on the telephone, that this thing is possible. The law provides for it. I don't have the time to come to you with a written application, as is the norm. But I can give you an undertaking, as the law provides, that within reasonable time, the oral application I make will be reduced into writing and present to you for filing. After some arguments, he agreed to hear me. And I went to the court and I made the application. He asked me to walk with me, an order of the court. By that time, I got a junior lawyer to come with me, and he typed out the order that I wanted from the court, a draft order. I presented the oral arguments, and the judge granted the oral order. The order in writing, because I can't go and serve an oral order. I had to get that order. And that was the order, in the name of Riaz Holadar, that stopped Mingo from by that time, Mingo had already made a declaration, though he did not complete the tabulation. He aborted the tabulation, though he was tabulating with that fraudulent document, that spreadsheet. As the pressure grew, he aborted that process, ran upstairs to the top of the building, and declared the results. As a result, I had to go and amend the court order, no longer stopping him, but to set aside the declaration that he made on the ground that it was unlawful, it was not done in accordance with the Act, and an order setting it aside.
We have allegations of rigged elections from 64 to 92. What I do know is that our Act and our laws provide for a process, and that process was not followed in a certain instance. And the deviation from that process, it's what caused the questions to arise, the issues to arise, and finally to be settled in the court. But I will tell you this. Sitting in Ashman's building on March the 4th, I had a colleague with me, a junior colleague, and he turned to me and he hung his head and he said, "Ms. Chase, this can't be it. This can't be the rigging. Rigging does not take place in front of your face. Rigging is something that happens away from you that you don't see." And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, well, let's see how it goes, you know, because it was still early on in March 4th. But the shenanigans had started, the activities had started, and it started to make itself apparent as to what was taking place in front of you. But it was still unbelievable.
The room was filled, and the numbers were calling for boxes in Region 4. And it was not matching the SOPs. It was not matching the SOPs, so I started to repeat the numbers to the person who was calling. And the room, because of the fact that other parties did not have the SOPs, and it would appear that the APNU was using a spreadsheet. Amazingly, a spreadsheet, which was being also used by the GCOM staff. And numbers were being called, and I kept repeating the numbers, and that is when everyone's attention was brought to the fact that box after box on the East Bank, box after box in Region 4, the numbers were inflated.
Was the bold, brazen, brass-faced attempt. This is the modern age. Cell phones, cameras, technology, people around the world watching. And you're attempting to rig an election, but before we miss this point, Mingo and company at Ashman's building were carrying out the wishes of a group that was assembled elsewhere. And that group showed their ugly head by financing, representing, filing court cases, petitions, carrying us through the mud for the 5 months. Mingo's first move of getting a Region 4 statements of Region 4 declaration passed and added to the other 10 to get a declaration was really to cheat an election, get results declared, and the PPP to challenge those results by way of an election petition after. That was a concoction.
Carol Joseph assaulting an election candidate. That was an atavistic reversion to the 60s, to the 70s, to the 80s. Again, I say you guys were pretty young to see what was happening in 73. 2 guys got killed. The soldiers shot 2 guys and killed them. Bolanot and Jagan. So, when that description there was known to the world, because people were filming it, people were filming what went on inside GCOM, people were filming. This is the age of the smartphone.
Pretension is that GCOM is one entity and the political parties are a different entity. At that point in time, and it was borne out subsequently, if it is that you have agents of an entity putting forward one narrative and manipulating reality to show a narrative, and you have a political machinery, particularly an incumbent government, that is in support of and signing off on that, literally signing off on the narrative, then you have the fundamental danger of the basic machinery of establishing the democracy being under assault.
Listen, we can confirm here. If my numbers say one thing, your numbers say the same thing, and then GCOM's numbers are saying something else, something's wrong here. So we were able to, from that point in time, start to unfold because you unfold the plot because you realized with confirmation that they were trying to rig.
When they would keep telling their supporters that, he's going to swear in today and giving them a time. He's going to swear in this afternoon at 3 o'clock, or he's going to be sworn in tomorrow. I felt disappointed in them as leaders, and I felt really sorry for their supporters. And I thought if they only knew the truth, they would not be used in this manner. And they would put their people on the streets, whether the sun is shining or whether the rain is falling, and Granger would be locked away somewhere, or comfortably locked away somewhere, and his supporters are on the streets chanting and putting themselves at risk because we were already, COVID was here, and people are in the streets endangering themselves.
Persons felt betrayed. They betrayed their own people, and on to this day they're still betraying their people with the lies they're being spewed.
I had known from the 70s and 80s, and this was authoritarian. This was the PNC stamping their power down on you or attempting to do that. But the people this time stood up. We were not intimidated. We did not take bullying. We on social media, people stood up.
I saw Mingo in the most lawless and disrespectful manner attempt to declare an illegal result in front of cameras. And that is where it started for me. That day, I saw big men and big women cry in that room because people just didn't know what else to do. People did not know what else to do when he did what he did.
They were rigging this thing in a way that was an assault on the dignity of every human.
What we saw was a blatant, unashamed attempt by a political party and its leaders to stamp on the will of the people, to trample on their democracy. That is what they did. And what is the will of the people? Coming together collectively with one opinion that they want to go in this direction and they want to be led by this group of people.
The AFC, or whatever is left of them, they were fully involved in that, and they must never, ever, ever come to you again and tell you anything about, to the Guyanese people, about them being righteous or good or capable. We saw what has been unfolding, all the contracts they gave themselves and the things they took for themselves and so on. But that moment, they had a chance to separate themselves out from that level of corruption, that level of rot, and they did not. And so we must not let them off the hook because they are equally responsible for this. Things would have changed if that political party had said early on, from the 5th to hold up here, I didn't see these SOPs. I would like to see the party's SOPs because they went together as one party. And if it does not add up to what Mingo and Lowenfield is attempting to declare here, then we will separate ourselves from you. And we will say that we absolutely cannot do this. All of them, from Granger to Nagamutu to Kemraj, and this is their legacy, we mustn't forget it. This is what we must remember them by. They were willing to go and be sworn in and enjoy power that the people of Guyana did not want them to have. And we mustn't forget that.
217,000 people voted for you. And you have said, and various former ministers and now MPs have gone on record as saying that the SOPs that they have match the numbers that Mr. Mingo came up with. But yet they have not produced said SOPs. Now you're telling 217,000 good Guyanese folk to believe in you blindly without a shred of proof.
Carefully contemplated plan of stealing the elections, declaring victory early, orchestrating the parties and celebrations, and in fact making arrangements for the swearing in of the then president. I think over the next few days the ceremonial horse guards were prepared and ready and waiting.
There were plenty of eyes. It wasn't a case where if something happened, it would go unnoticed. For me, the biggest worry started happening on the 4th when Mingo failed ill. And I remember when that happened, receiving a call from a family member saying to me, I can't believe it. I can't believe that I am living this life again in Guyana.
I have always maintained that there had to be some collusion between APNU officials and certain GCOM officials, because I could not see GCOM or people like Mr. Mingo and even Mr. Lowenfield acting on their own accord. So there had to be some instruction given.
Then you have an unprecedented act in an electoral history. The chairman of a contesting political party signing the declaration of results prescribed by law, when nowhere in the law says that the contesting parties have to have their signature. What was her signature doing there?
There were systems in place, sinister systems in place for them to win at all costs. All costs. It didn't matter if they collapsed the democracy. It didn't matter if they committed the most heinous violation on this nation by stealing the will of the people.
We've adopted the title of these discussions, Never Again. What does that mean? It means never again must a political party in power be able to manipulate the election system in order to keep themselves in power.
Carried a huge amount of uncertainty because there were talks of sanctions. There was a general feeling within the business community that nobody wanted to take any sort of long-term decisions concerning investment or expansion until we knew what the outcome was.
We must remain grateful to those that stood by Guyana, that supported Guyana and Guyanese to ensure that as a country we remain in the path of being a democracy, that we maintain our respect as Guyanese.
Never again must we have a political party or any person who feels comfortable to think they can do this in front of the eyes of the world. And I say that, when I say in the eyes of the world, you had cameras rolling, video cameras filming everything that's happening here. Everybody had their phones on, filming everything that's happening here. And the representatives from our allies and friends around the world, the A, B, C, E countries, Americans, British, Canadians, European Union, other ambassadors, observers from the various observer missions, the Commonwealth, the CARICOM, Carter Center. These are the eyes of the world. This happened in their presence, So any political party who feels comfortable doing that, never again means for me that they must never again see executive office and executive power where they can ever try to perpetuate this on us again.
Without a democratic country, you cannot be part of the global society of countries. You're now like a stepchild, a locked out, a strange thing, a cut out from the world, like other countries like North Korea and all of those countries that have dictatorship. They suffer, their people suffer, and they die out economically. They have social ills that follow that. So what you have are countries that, you know, they have a finite life. They will die once you're cut out from the international community. And the democracy of a country is the link between you being a dictator and you being part of the rest of the world that are right-thinking countries. So we cannot really allow people or bunches of people or even tribes or even parties to trample on that, because all of us are affected by it.
People must go to jail for attempting to rig an election. And I say this with all sincerity. Rigging an election is not a simple thing that you could laugh at each other and say, well, I get in, y'all got to go and get an election petition now. It is thwarting the will of the people that the Guyanese people must say, listen, we will never again put dishonest, blatantly disrespectful, and rigors again to run a country. Especially when they campaign on a banner of decency, honesty, and integrity. Because that was fascinating. You are projecting to the whole world decency, honesty, and integrity, and you participated in the rig. And you were the masterminds of the rig.
Let me say that the reform will manifest itself in two forms. One, you have the constitutional reforms. That will be a protracted exercise because that requires 2/3 majority. And you have the riggers there. Their support is necessary to get anything passed in the parliament by a 2/3 majority. And of course, the riggers will not support reforms to make the process transparent because they're hoping for another opportunity to thief the election.
Never again can we trust the APNU+AFC. They coming in all these guys now. We see their reactions. Action starts again in Parliament recently, and they must never be trusted again. So I call on my Guyanese brothers and sisters to do the right thing as we head to another elections. We're having local government elections soon. Never again we must trust these people on whatever they say on their platform.
Never again would we allow persons should be allowed to think that they can rig an election without interference. Never again should we allow persons in positions to believe that they can manipulate and control those positions to their benefit.